Weakened but defiant, Hezbollah has been attacking Israel as it pummels southern Lebanon and parts of Beirut. That's despite the Lebanese government's ban on Hezbollah's military activities. What will be the fallout for Lebanon? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. Lebanon is once again drawn into a war many of its leaders say is not their fight. Against the government's warnings, Hezbollah has joined Iran in its conflict with Israel. The armed group says it has a right to respond as part of what it calls a resistance campaign. But this time, the Lebanese government has responded by taking the decision to ban Hezbollah's military activities and demanding it disarm. The group has not heeded that warning. Now, as the war between the US, Israel and Iran widens to Lebanon, can Hezbollah's involvement be of any real help to Tehran? And what price will Lebanon pay as a result? We'll talk to our panel of guests in just a moment. But first, this report from Imogen Kimber.
Israeli airstrikes once again rain down on Beirut and batter South Lebanon. And fire rages in the town Tyre after Israeli forces hit an electricity facility. Israel has issued evacuation orders telling residents to move north of the Litani River. So far, more than 83,000 people from the south of Lebanon and southern Beirut have been displaced. Many are now sleeping in shelters and relying on aid to survive. Israel has been pummelling Lebanon near daily, despite a ceasefire with Hezbollah in November 2024. But this current escalation began after Hezbollah fired a barrage of rockets on northern Israel on Monday, in support of its main backer and weapons supplier Iran, after joint Israeli-US strikes killed its supreme leader.
Hezbollah
and its Islamic resistance are responding to the Israeli-American aggression, and this is a legitimate right. They wanted a battle in which they reached the furthest limits, but our choice is to confront it until the ultimate sacrifice, and we will not surrender.
Israel has pushed further into Lebanese sovereign territory and says it has troops on the ground.
Northern Command has moved forward and is creating a buffer, as promised, between residents and any potential threat.
But historically, Hezbollah has had some success in ground wars, and analysts say the group may see this as an advantage. Hezbollah was created in 1982 to fight the Israeli occupation of the south, supported by Iran. The group declared victory in 2000 after Israel withdrew from the area. In Lebanon's sectarian political landscape, they have been one of the major representatives of the Shia population in government and provide them with basic services such as schools and hospitals. But many Lebanese people say they act as a state within a state. The Prime Minister has called on Hezbollah to stop its military operations.
The Lebanese state declares its absolute rejection of any military actions launched from the Lebanese territory outside the framework of its legitimate institutions. It affirms that the decision of war and peace is exclusively in its hands, which necessitates the immediate prohibition of all Hezbollah security and military activities as being outside the law and obliging it to hand over its weapons to the Lebanese state.
The November 2024 ceasefire terms included Hezbollah's disarmament, which had begun. The deal came after the group suffered huge losses to Israel during the war that began in October 2023, including the killing of its leader Hassan Nasrallah. And because of that, Hezbollah seems to consider this fight with Israel to be an existential one. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, let's discuss all of this further with our panel of guests who are joining us today on Inside Story. And in Beirut, we have Heiko Wimmen, the project director for Iraq, Syria and Lebanon at the International Crisis Group. Nimrod Novik is in Tel Aviv, a member of the leadership of Commanders for Israel's Security. He served as a senior policy advisor to the former Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres. And in Washington, D.C., Nabil Khoury, a former US diplomat and non-resident fellow at the Arab Center, Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for joining us on Inside Story. Let me start with you, Heiko, because you are there on the ground in the place where in recent days bombs have been falling. What is your assessment of why Hezbollah decided to take the action it did after the death of the Ayatollah?
Well, I would say I take them at their word. They said right after the attack in the first statement that this was to avenge Khamenei, and like kind of tacked on at the end of that statement was and the defense of Lebanon, which is I would say is a nod to the fact that burning Lebanon on the altar of Iranian interest, as you could put it, is not something that is very popular in Lebanon, including perhaps within the bases, the grassroots support of Hezbollah. So it was certainly that motivation. It was the motivation to join Iran, to join the, let's say, the center of the axis of resistance in this fight. And then we can discuss whether that was an order from Tehran or whether the people here did that on their own accord. But this seems to be the central motivation.
So, Nabil, one of the reasons I'm asking that question is to rewind till last year, June of last year, during the war then, the war that lasted 12 days. Israel attacked Iran, then joined in by the US. Of course, we didn't know that that was going to be just 12 days at the time. It could have gone on much longer. Hezbollah, on that occasion, its guns remained silent. What's the difference, do you think?
Well, I think it's partially the assassination of Khamenei, but it all goes back to Gaza. People must understand that the sentiment for the Palestinians and the mass murder that they underwent in Gaza resonates deeply with a lot of peoples in Fertile Crescent countries, not just in Lebanon. And Hezbollah took a serious beating from the 2-year war. So it's been laying low and it's been very patient since the ceasefire about a year ago. They have been quiet, but Israel has been engaged in daily bombardment all over Lebanon. So at some point, patience runs out and you put all the factors together. And therefore, they retaliate.
OK, I want to come to Nimrod in a moment in Tel Aviv about the Israeli response. But first, back to you, Heiko, because I think it's worth adding, is it not, that Hezbollah had, on a political level, we're told, reassured other politicians as we'd seen those forces arriving, those US forces, that armada of forces arriving, that it wasn't going to be dragged in. Does it suggest to you that perhaps there is some division within their ranks?
Very good question. I mean, so we hear that they gave these guarantees, if you want to call it that. And there have been reports suggesting that there was something of a rebellion, perhaps of parts of the military wing, if that's the right word, against the political leadership about this stance of not engaging. I don't think anybody is in a position to come to a judgment on that. I mean, what exactly goes on in the decision-making processes inside the party, what role perhaps Iranian cadres have at this point, it's pretty much a black box, to me at least. I don't have a lamp to really shine light into that. I would also say at this point it perhaps doesn't matter anymore, because here we are, Hezbollah has joined the Iranian war effort, so to speak. And just to add to the question or to the answer of Nabil, I think one difference between June and now is June 25 and now is that in June 25, I would say that Iran was looking for a calibrated response to the attack. Right now, they're hitting everything, everywhere they can with everything they have. So that perhaps is also a difference. And Hezbollah is just one of the things they have. So use it, even if it may not move the needle much.
Nimrod in Tel Aviv, we saw a very quick, devastating response from the Israeli side. Was this just a response, or was the Hezbollah attack a pretext, a good excuse for something that Israel already planned? Because the attack on Iran by the US and Israel was done at a time of their choosing. Had they always planned when that was going to happen, they were going to hit Lebanon and hit Hezbollah too?
Yes, I think you're right. It was an opportunity that Hezbollah provided Israel with. I think that Nabil was right in referencing Gaza in this context, but from an Israeli perspective, it's a different dimension. Since October 7th, 23, something quite substantial has changed in the Israeli mindset, security and otherwise, and that is a lesson learned not to wait until adversaries strike, and not to count on our appreciation, understanding of intentions, but rather focus on capabilities. And the pendulum, in my judgment, has swung too far in the other direction, whereas there is a sentiment that if we can, we should. And I think that militarily, I don't think there is doubt that we have the capabilities to deal with multiple adversaries, but what is missing, in my judgment, is the diplomatic leg.
Nimrod, what do you think Israel actually wants? Does it want a stable Lebanon, or does it want a weak, fragile country there?
I think that since the emergence of the current government in Lebanon, the Israeli mindset on this issue has changed. And I think that the concern that Hezbollah was driving everything for decades was replaced with an appreciation that there is a government we can work with, even if it is reluctant to negotiate directly and it has to be via Washington or other mediators. Nonetheless, there is a great appreciation for the courage and resolve of the current government. There are doubts about capabilities, and that's where perhaps diplomacy and other instruments should kick in. But yeah, I think Israel wants a stable Lebanon where Hezbollah might remain as a political force for sure, but is not threatening, neither Hezbollah nor anybody else threatens our civilian population.
Nabil, talk there of the new rulers, the new leaders in Lebanon, because you do have a new top team, a new Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, who has been an international judge and an ambassador, and a new president, Joseph Aoun. They have also taken a new approach, a very different approach now that conflict has broken out, saying that Hezbollah needs to stop all military activities. Are you surprised by how bold their approach is, and are you worried about where it could lead, though?
Well, I'm not surprised. There's a lot of pressure on them from Washington and from Tel Aviv, but their words have not really been translated into any kind of wise action. And I'm thinking of diplomacy here. There are many analysts in Israel as well as in Washington who understand full well that the Lebanese state, the Lebanese army, does not have the capability to disarm Hezbollah and does not have the political will to do so, knowing also that if they did, another civil war would break out in Lebanon. The problem is that the political appointees, the government, the decision makers in Israel and Washington don't understand or refuse to understand, and they don't care if they push Lebanon towards another civil war. So the question here is, the new government wants to have the exclusive right to decide war and peace. Fine, everybody agrees in principle to that. But the Lebanese state has historically failed to do either. They've never defended the border of Lebanon, and they've never used diplomacy effectively enough, first of all, internally, to agree on a national defense strategy that all Lebanese would agree to, and then use its contacts in the West to help bring about peace, and to begin with, stop the daily harassment by Israeli forces.
Heiko, I mean, the big question, or one of the big questions here, is what has Hezbollah got now? What are their capabilities? What is their weaponry? How many missiles have they got left? And that remains a very unanswered question, because we don't know how damaged they were in the last war, 2023 to 2024. What's your assessment?
I mean, well, for that, you should probably ask our friends in the Israeli military intelligence or think tanks that speak on their behalf. I don't know. I simply don't have no way of knowing. No access to this information. But I think what we see is that there are residual capacities. There is residual capabilities. They can shoot missiles, smaller salvos. They can fly drones. It doesn't seem to be much compared to where they were a year and a half ago, basically before the big Israeli strikes were launched and before the campaign really got serious. But it's still enough to create a nuisance, at least in the northern Israel. It's still enough to send people to the bunkers. It's still enough to give Israel a pretext to say we have to occupy a buffer zone up to the Litani, up to the Awali. We'll see how far they want to go, right? So that capacity is clearly there, and that is important because it suggests that structures of command and control and logistics and communication do work. Even though we still have apparently near complete intelligence penetration by the Israelis. I mean, the way that they do pinpointed attacks on Hezbollah personnel or Iranians clearly indicates that. And this also means if they can do that, if they can coordinate enough and efficiently to actually attack the Israelis under fire, under this kind of pressure, with this kind of intelligence penetration, then they surely can also mount a coherent military response if anybody comes domestically in Lebanon. The Lebanese army, for instance, comes after them and their weapons. And I think this is very important to realize and keep in mind. I mean, there have been suggestions that they're non-existent, that they're completely destroyed, that there's no way of pushing back. If the army would only push once, so to speak, this whole structure would be collapsed like a house of cards. They would be shown like in class. It would look like a Wizard of Oz. I think after these few days, I don't think anybody would propose that anymore. And if he or she does, it's reckless.
Nimrod, let me ask you the same question about the strength of Hezbollah. I know you are no longer plugged into all the secret Israeli intelligence, but you are very plugged into what's being said there in Israel. How strong do people think Hezbollah is? And let me add another part of the question. Also, how strong is Hezbollah's leadership? Because Hassan Nasrallah was killed in the last war. Naim Qassem, many observers say, is no Hassan Nasrallah.
Yeah, I think the sentiment in Israel, you reflected it accurately in terms of the leadership quality, the charisma, the command and control, etc. The perception here at least in the public domain, I have to be careful, is that Hezbollah has residual capacity to cause considerable damage. They have not used the few dozen longer range missiles that they do have. They used only short-term ones, short-range ones, as well as a few drones. In both categories, in all three categories, they still have residual capacity. I believe that the Israeli security forces are capable, both due to the intelligence penetration that was mentioned and due to other capabilities, is capable of further eroding the capacity of Hezbollah, and I expect that to happen in the coming days. I respectively dispute the assumption that in Jerusalem we don't care or even wish to see a civil war in Lebanon. I believe that is not true. I think we would like to see a stable Lebanon, but in the equation between eroding further Hezbollah capabilities and just sitting by and expecting it to launch at will, we are not going to sit back and just watch it.
Nabil, we've heard lots of talk with regard to the wider war, the US and Israel against Iran, that this is existential for Iran. Is this existential for Hezbollah too? Do they think they're fighting their last war here?
I think this is certainly one of the reasons that caused them to react when they did, is that Israeli daily bombardments have been reaching, as Heiko said, sensitive areas. Their intelligence has been very good. And therefore, in addition to decimating a large part of the leadership of Hezbollah, they've certainly degraded Hezbollah's firepower. And at some point, the feeling in Hezbollah leadership is, if we don't react now, we will lose the ability to react, period. And so they jumped into the fray. And again, they're banking here on Israeli society tiring from this war, and Donald Trump tiring from the economic cost, which is huge, which will ultimately affect the average consumer in the US, and therefore the average voter. So he may stand to lose a lot of votes in the upcoming elections. So this was a gamble on Hezbollah's part, but in the end, they do have a fight still in them, certainly with Israel, but I think more importantly internally. If there is a confrontation with the Aliyah, which I doubt very much that it will come to that, but if there is a kind of a mini civil war in Lebanon, different weapons, we're not talking about long-range rockets anymore, we're talking about small arms and hand-to-hand, and in that area, Hezbollah is still very strong. So they're still a factor.
Heiko, you are there in Beirut. The Lebanese people have suffered so much over so long. I want to focus on them for a moment. Very resilient, used to real hardship and very weak government. But, you know, we had the war from 2023 to 2024. Before that, financial collapse, the port blast. I mean, how tough is this for ordinary people there in Lebanon right now? I hear the figures of displaced have now gone up to 90,000.
Yes. Look, I mean, it's very different depending on where you sit. You know, of course, I mean, it's a strain and a drain on everybody. Well, I mean, my kid is out of school, right? I mean, I think twice and three times where I move. Yesterday, like somebody was coming and she was lucky, but an hour after she reached home, like a relative of mine, 4 people were killed on the airport road. You know, that affects everybody. But we really need to talk about the displaced. You know, so the displaced, it's now 90,000. There have been displacement orders for all Lebanon south of the Litani, which includes Sur, Tyre, city of about 200,000, if you take these orders literally, these people all have to leave. Today, there was a displacement order for all of Dahi, which is half of the metropolitan population of Beirut, 1 million people perhaps. If only 20% of these people flee, there's going to be complete chaos and mayhem, and these people have no shelters. There is no government. The government is completely, cannot respond to this. It would be foolish to blame them. Nobody can respond to this. These people, many of them are displaced for the second time now, and Hezbollah has, for all we know, no capabilities to help these people at this point. It's going to be, a disaster, humanitarian disaster of, I think, for this country, unprecedented size.
Okay.
And there's a potential.
Let me just bring in Nimrod, if I may, one last time. For Israel, this is a second front in the war. For much of the rest of the world, though, this is not the key venue. This is seen as a bit of a sideshow. Does that mean in Israel they think they can take the gloves off right now?
Well, I agree with you that for the world it is a sideshow, which is a sad commentary in and of itself. But no, I don't think that that's the context in which Israel is operating. As a matter of fact, I really hope that if Mr. Khoury is right in his assessment of the leadership calculations in Hezbollah, that's another evidence of how weak that leadership is. Because if they thought that Israel will tire as a result of a few salvos of Hezbollah missiles, they really misjudge us, not for the first time. 2.5 years of war, controversial war in Gaza, didn't tire Israeli society. So no, the resilience of the Israeli society is not in question. Also, I somehow doubt that they reached the conclusion that if they don't fire now, tomorrow they will not be able to, because if that was the case, they would not just confine themselves to a few missiles here and there and a few drones here and there. I think that they were half-heartedly responding to Iranian urgings.
Thank you very much, Nimrod, Novik, Heiko, Wimmen, and Nabil Khoury. Comprehensive coverage of the conflict continues on Al Jazeera with our teams on the ground across the region. You can also go a little deeper with even more context and analysis on our website, aljazeera.com. We'd love to hear from you too. Go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or use X there. Look for @AJ Inside Story. For now, from me, James Bays, and the whole Inside Story team, stay safe and keep healthy. Bye-bye for now.